Alrighty, welcome to Unbiased and on the Fence, you guys. We have T. Taylor to discuss her BQH session, which was out of this world. So many synchronicities. How's it going, T?
It's great. How are you guys?
Everybody's doing wonderful. We got the people pouring into the chat already. And I do want to just let you guys know right at the outset of this, I do have the link to the actual BQH session we're going to be discussing in the links below in the description. So be sure to check that out to hear the whole thing, because there was a lot of synchronicities between her session and before I even released April's session. Sherry had a connection with April's session because she saw the rivers flowing backwards at the time of these great earth changes or whatever. And then I watched this video and it's got this guy filming and he's freaking out. He's like, the river is flowing backwards. And I'm like, oh my God, that came out in a session. And then that connected with April's session where, you know, this sort of, she felt glued to the ground for 3 days. And that came through your session as stasis. I mean, it was a different perspective of the same exact thing. I mean, these different people and groups and everything. Let's start, I think a good place to start is with the 4 different group analogies. That way, as we're talking about this, people will understand better some of the details we're going to bring out from the session, because I think that's a really cool.
Sure. Could I actually just give a preface, as because I re-listened to it as well, and I just wanted to give everybody a heads up. So as I am re-listening to it as well, I would like to just explain very quickly that when we do these deep hypnosis sessions, when you're communicating with either your higher self or you could say other beings, for me, the way I receive communication is they can only use what I have in my reference. So my reference to some might be skewed in certain areas, as such as linear time. Me and Shane were just laughing about linear time because we were a little late today. But when I'm giving a time period in my BQH session, now if I'm saying like early, 1800s or late 1800s, here's the thing. I could be so off. Like my reference for linear time is crap. So please, everybody, please take it with a grain of salt when I'm discussing linear time, because I'm not very good at that. And so they all can only use my reference. So for me, 5 minutes could be 5 years ago. My people laugh at me all the time. So just heads up on that. I just wanted to get that out of the ballpark. So I know I was listening to it, was like, oh my gosh, that doesn't feel right to me even. That's so off.
So yeah, that's really cool, because we really, while we discuss people that go to that somnambulistic level, and it's real deep and it's really cool, and that's why I love doing them with Sherry, because she gets so deep and she gets all this really cool information. You don't have to get that deep to get solid information, and that's one of the ways you and I were quite aware and alert during the session. Almost even, for me, it was almost even ultra alert even to my surroundings.
Felt very awake.
Yeah. And I think this is important for people to know, because people will feel that way and they feel like they're not there yet. But your higher self begins to take your imagination and work with it. And then if you just go with it, it just starts flowing right through you. And that's how my session was. That's how your session was. It's almost a quicker interaction. We didn't even have to edit your session because it's so quick. You're alert. You don't have to really, you can just let it flow right through you. And I think between that and somebody going super deep where they like don't remember anything, it's like night and day, but you still get great information through. It doesn't have to be deep,
Exactly. And it's the same, so much the same information, which is one of the most amazing things, is that we don't know each other. We don't know what the other person's saying. There's no connection. We have totally different lives, but so many of us, like you said, it's different perspectives, same information. And that's the most amazing thing to me. So I love it. But if you want to dive into it, let's, you said start with the 4.
Yeah, I think that would give us a good
last
reference because people can
Sure.
understand these 4 groups. We see them every day, right?
We do, right? It's becoming more and more obvious, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
it is.
yeah, I use this analogy a lot. I think I heard it originally through somebody else's, so I'm sure I stole a little bit of it. But I added what I hear the 3 groups a lot, which is the first group is the group. I think the way that I used it in one of my videos, which I'd heard someone was lovely. It's like imagine you're standing on a rug. So the first group knows they're standing on a rug. They see the rug. They know what the colors the rug are. They know how wide the rug is. They know all about the rug. They're not stupid. They got it. They got it. They got it. And not only do they see the rug, they can feel the rug when somebody starts tugging on it from under them, because somebody's starting to reweave that rug, and they're watching as it's and they're feeling. They are acutely aware of the whole thing. Second group, they don't even really realize they're standing on the rug until somebody from the first group grabs them and says, hey, by the way, look at your feet. You're standing on a rug. And don't you notice it's being kind of altered right now? And they're like, oh my gosh, I get it. That's crazy. I got it. Love it. But they could kind of feel it already. They just couldn't necessarily see it until somebody showed them. But they were aware something was happening. Third group.
And most importantly, they're on the rug.
And they're on the rug. Yes, they're
Right.
standing off the rug. Third group, oblivious. They're too busy. They're the ones who are usually so in got to work for that money because they're taking care of people. They're doing this, they're doing that for whatever the reason is. They have a lot of responsibility. So their energy is open in an unconscious way. They're good people. They want changes. It's just they don't have time or energy or wherewithal at the moment for whatever reason to be aware that they're even standing on a rug. So even if you try to show this third group of people, they're going to be like, I don't have time to even care about standing on a rug or whatever the situation is, but they're still open, so they'll be fine. Fourth group of people is the group that I added, and those are the people who are like, F the rug, I don't, hostile, they just don't want any part of it. I don't even think they're standing on a rug. They might be across the room. They don't even want to go near a rug. I don't know what the deal is with those guys, but they're just the type, they're a group of people who it doesn't matter. They're just not chosen with their higher self to go through this process. At this time, I was going to preface that. What I would say is this group is much, much smaller than the original, you could say, forecasts of it or the original potentials for it. Originally, this group was going to be a very large group of people, such as we saw with the Armageddon software. It was going to be a large catastrophe. We don't have to go through that anymore because we have reached this precipice, So I think a lot of people get really freaked out, and I know I did in the beginning. Am I going to be in that fourth group of people? Am I going to miss the boat? Am I not going to... Anybody watching your channel, it's not an issue. It's just not an issue because you're aware. That fourth group of people is the group of people who are just so unconscious and just so resistant and just don't want to pick their head up out of the sand. It's really that ostrich in the hand, and it's just their higher self choosing a different route. There's nothing wrong with that. And they will advance later, even if they decide not to now. So we don't have to worry. Everything will be dealt with in love. And sometimes with this fourth group, what will happen is they will be, during that event, you could say, the information I got is they will be taken care of and they'll have an opportunity to rise in a much shorter amount of time than it would normally take. They're going to join everybody at some point. It's going to be on their schedule, So I would say, too, the energies coming in right now. Oh, did you listen?
Oops, you're still there.
Okay. I was going to say the energies coming in right now, everybody needs to be aware of, too. We've hit this critical max where it used to take years to pass some of these levels of this consciousness awakening, and now it's you can do it in a couple months, so it'll be fine. People will catch up quickly, don't worry.
So you might hear the thunder in the background. It's
oh my gosh, I did.
Might have more rain in our outlook or whatever, but so one of the things that I thought was just really cool was what I sort of alluded to in the beginning, how you saw this event take place where some people needed more time to sort of, I guess, integrate the light, flash, or energy that comes in. Others seem to be taken off and dealt with that way, not in a loving way. That sounds like, I want to make sure people know, to help with the integration process. And those two things we're seeing in April's, the way she saw it. First, she was like stuck on the ground, and of course she would be in the beginning group, that might need a little bit of time to integrate these energies coming in. So she was stuck to the ground. I had her sort of leave her, let her consciousness come out of her body and observe, and she saw this other group going up to the light. So really, I thought this was a different perspective, but very similar to how you explained it, in your session.
Right. For me, it was really interesting because when I had my awakening, it was for me, like I tell a lot of people, mine wasn't like some people's. A lot of us seem to have had those traumatic NDE events. And for me, I just woke up from a surgery, just knowing more, having more information. And I got told very early on, multiple times, this same message would come on and play on my phone over and over again by itself. And it would say, what the event was. And I didn't know what the event. I thought it sounded like a bunch of hoo-ha. But the message was over and over again, stasis. Stasis was the word they used for me. Now that's a reference I would understand though, because I'm a techie girl, I'm a sci-fi girl. I understood the word stasis. So it's, they'll reach everybody with the information and how that person will best receive it. And so, excuse me, I might have to mute for just a second. Hold on just a second, sorry.
No problem.
He's my son's phone, so I'm getting a little loud.
No, it's quite all right. So I'm thinking of stasis, and I'm thinking of another way maybe to explain that to everyone. If you're not familiar with, let me see, let me get that off of there. You guys know who I am, and take that off there. So stasis, like cryogenics, where, you're sort of put to sleep, or we might think of it like anesthesia. I was giving some other examples of stasis for those who aren't really gamers. Like cryogenics, sort of put into hibernation or sleep or anesthesia or something along those lines.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sorry, I forget that happens sometimes. Like, everybody should know what I'm talking about. Yeah, basically it's just the way they explained it to me was that because really what it's going to come down is when you could say the event or the solar flash or however you want to term that as happens. Who's going to be able to stay on the actual physical earth at that moment is going to be very dependent on how much light your physical body can actually integrate and withstand. Because they're not going to let somebody be here and be burned up or whatever that case may be. If we just tried to do that now, the way that we are, so many of us would energetically burn out. Our physical bodies just literally would not be able to handle it, and it would be a big issue. So everybody will have this done in a very loving way. Nobody will be cold, because that was my concern. As a mother, I'm like, what if I'm next to my children and I can't move and they can't move and they're cold and I can't give them a blanket or I can't tell them what's happening or, you know what I mean? I can't do any of those things. Now, I did receive some very interesting information, and I would like to drop this because I don't know if this still applies, because as we know, timelines are always switching. At the very beginning of my journey, I was given a lot of information that I don't really even think applies anymore in the way that it did, because we changed those potential outcomes. But I was told during that stasis, during those days, for the people that are, you could say like April's version, held to the ground and able to move, the veil will be completely down at that point. So you will be able to see what's in the field that has been in the field all around you. And so I was told that is a time you need to close your eyes and go to your happy place, because if you're not prepared for what you're going to see, it could be triggering for some people in a fear way. And they don't want that to happen, which is why some people will be taken up so they won't have to see that. But I was just told, just be cognizant that the portals will be open at that point. So where your thought process is where you can go at that point, and it'll be very different right away. It won't be this phase out where it's going to take weeks for people to realize something has changed. It'll be immediate. Yeah.
So it's just, I've heard of, I don't remember if it was the Law of One or where, but they at some point put everybody to sleep, did some work on the sun, and then let them wake up and nobody knew anything. And I'm like, that sounds like if people go into this sort of anesthesia state or, put to sleep and taken up and integrated, that we might just sort of forget about that part and just wake up and then there's so many different things going on,
Right. Yeah. I think everybody will just be awake with this knowledge. It will be like the veils, you'll remember at that point. I mean, that's the information I seem to get, is at that point, the cellular memories will be very accessible, I guess is the word I would say. And so we won't have that fog like we did. We'll all know what's transpired and why. And those people, like I said, who just aren't quite there yet, will, they'll only need I was told just a few days, really. Because I was like, are they going to be separated for years? Are we going to remember who they are? Are we going to miss them? How is that? What about families being separated? I had all these questions, especially as a mother. I was freaking out at the beginning because we're told, don't hold attachment. And I'm like, I'm a mother. I cannot not be attached to my children. That's never going to happen. Right? So I was just told, that fourth group is going to be actually a much smaller group than what we originally thought. So many people are waking up so quickly. And there's really very few people who, because we have to remember right now, every single person on this earth is getting hit with these higher photonic rays. Every person. So even those people who are very resistant, they're still raising. Even though they don't want to, they're kicking and screaming a little bit, they're still raising. And so that group, though, is becoming smaller and smaller. You know, people are starting to make those decisions that they don't want to, you know, stay in those lower vibrational energies. Some people are, though, and like I said, they'll be removed to a place where they'll be fine.
Well, you know, one of the things that came up that was like this little nugget of beautiful information in the middle of your session. We kind of brushed over it, and it's easy to miss. But we were talking about people that's having a difficult time, and I think this ties in well with what you were just talking, because, you know, if someone triggers us, our reaction to that can totally change how their reaction is to it. You know, if you respond in love, then that's going to sort of shift that whole interaction with sort of this fourth group, because we're going to interact with them all the time, and that can pull them up into the third group, perhaps, you know, just over time, you know, just raising the consciousness together. And I think that's what's happening that you see. But you talked about how frequency is super important, in that, you know, we bond with the frequency that we resonate with. So if we are like high vibe and we're keeping our spirits alive and stuff, we're going to be bonding ourselves to that higher vibrational aspect or of reality. But then some of us that are having a horrible time right now, they're feeling impatient. They really need to do whatever it takes right now to get to their happy place, whether it's dance crazy, listen to music, whatever it takes. And ask for help. That was another thing that came up. If you're feeling that bad, ask for help, and you'll get this energetic ping. I forgot the word they use for it, but they'll give you this energetic hug or love that you can feel to help lift your spirits. But you have to ask in most cases.
Yeah, and it's so, I actually have a whole bunch of notes that I wanted to touch on, so I didn't forget to, and that's right in line. It's very synchronistic with what I was touching on, and actually what I posted on my Facebook a couple of days ago, because relationships for so many people right now are a little difficult, because we're seeing, you know, nobody's at the same place, and those, we're seeing the differences between those that are in a 5D state of consciousness and those that are in a 3D state of consciousness. It's really becoming very apparent, right? And those in a 3D state of consciousness, I'd run across an Eckhart Tolle video, which I thought was fantastic. And if you can hook up to my Facebook page, I have it posted there. But he's talking about, can you stay with somebody if you are awakened and they are not awakened in a relationship? And he talks about a couple crucial points, which I think are very important. And I was experiencing this in my own relationship, because I'm very obviously aware, and my guy is just starting the process. I mean, he's really just starting, although he's very sparkly, just FYI. But point being, it's fine to help people when they're in that unconscious state, but there becomes a point where when you're awakened, you actually will trigger them so badly sometimes, when we're talking about this fourth group of people, in a hostile way. Their unconsciousness can actually become dangerous to you, the individual, because they, as he says, when they go to verbal abuse, that can go to physical abuse very quickly, because they're becoming so triggered in the programming, the unconscious programming that they have. And that's not, it's not towards you personally. It's just you are showing them something that they are not ready, or have not unprogrammed or dealt with, or they haven't gone through the trauma healing process like they need to. So when you're saying something and that triggers that cellular memory for them, they oftentimes don't even know why they're reacting to it. You can walk into a store and I'll talk with you in just a minute. Okay. Yeah, I'm literally live right now. Sorry, sweetheart. Sorry, my son just got home. You gotta love family. But you know, it's when you are, you know, in those state of when you're trying to help someone, be aware that if somebody starts disrespecting you, make your boundary clear. You can help people, but you should not be putting yourself at risk to do so, is my advice. And here's the thing: when we have people in our geographical or biological areas that are in these four groups or these third groups, we've been placed there sometimes for a reason, but don't take that on yourself that you need to save them. Everybody's going to go through the process that they need for them. And so sometimes we get into these relationships with people where we're like, we stay too long, or we put up with too much crap, or we don't have our boundaries, especially those of us that are empaths. And that was a big message from them too, was love has many different facets, and you need to self-love first. And that means taking care of you first and primarily. But once that's done, if you see somebody struggling, it is so important to reach out to them, because everybody is going through those tower moments right now. I don't care who you are. I don't care how enlightened you are. Something in your world probably hasn't been dealt with perfectly. You're not perfect yet. And so you're going to have to address that. And so lots of people are having these tower moments, and everybody falls. But when we fall, we have to reach out our hand to the person behind us. It's so important, because like you said, we can change that game up for them. I don't think it's ever too late to hope.
Absolutely. But yeah, and it is a balance because you want to be there for them, but you don't want to push either because everybody's at their point they're at. And I think a lot of times, particularly if we have sort of a strong religious background, because it's sort of pushed out there, you must go out and proselytize, you must go change the world. But, we try to do it more by force and judgment rather than just being there and loving people. And I think that's where that important balance comes in, not to take too much responsibility for someone else because ultimately everybody's where they're at and you're not going to really change that too much. You can help them along their path, but you're not going to hop them up a couple of rungs as much as I'd love to be able to say, here, hop up a couple of rungs. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work that way.
There's no shortcuts. There just really isn't. And like, it's just my particular situation. Sometimes you have to walk away and take care of yourself first for somebody to not be an enabler, because a lot of us have been. I know I would enable everybody because I just want everybody to be happy, you know what I mean? And I didn't necessarily do that probably in the healthiest way, until I woke up. And so now as my boundaries are becoming very firm, that freaks out people. And so what we'll see is what we call an extinction behavior, which is somebody upping the ante on a fit that they're going to throw. And you'll see a lot of that with that third group and that fourth group of people, because they're not getting the same reaction from you that they used to get that energy feed for them. You understand? So they're going to up that ante. They're going to freak out more. They're going to push you in a way they hadn't pushed you maybe, or they're going to go for the jugular because they want that same reaction you used to give them, because now they're seeing you've removed yourself. You become more of the observer. You're not plugging in and playing those same repeated cycles or patterns. You're like, I'm not doing that anymore. And that's freaking them out because they can't engage with you in the same way. So you're either going to lose the person or something magical will happen and they will step it up. You know what I mean? So
and
raising your standards is never bad.
Your shirt is awesome. Can you show it?
Oh, yes. Don't kill my vibe.
That's awesome.
Yeah, don't kill my vibe, people, because I'm always fine. Usually me, myself, and my energy is fantastic. I'm just like, woohoo! But when some other bullshit, excuse my language, comes into my reality field from somebody else, that's when I'll go off the rails too. Yeah, it's hard not to do with an empath.
Yeah, we do share the earth, so of course we're going to be triggered from time to time.
Well, and what we're seeing too is that the people that we love who are just starting this process, they'll vent and they'll go to the safest place, which happens to be a lot of us, those high vibration people, because we are empathic, we are understanding. So they will bring all their stuff to us sometimes, and sometimes they dump it, not the nicest way. So like, again, just boundaries, make sure that you're taking care of yourself first. And then when you show them how to do that, it will change the game for them as well.
Something that was really fun that came up in your session that tied into something that had happened to me when I first discovered the Mandela effect. You talked about how clouds are consciousness or have a consciousness to them.
I love that.
And like when I first found out about the Mandela effect, and I was like really thinking about that lion and lamb scripture, and I'm walking around at night, and I don't remember, I guess it was the moon was full because the sky was lit up, and the clouds were all lions and lambs. And it was like this huge sign in the sky for me, right? So
and it was for you.
Yeah, it was for me. Probably no one else would have seen it, but there is a certain connection. I've seen it happen on multiple occasions where I see something and people just don't see it. It's like my perception of something gets altered in a way that isn't happening for everyone. Sort of like somebody might see a UFO and then someone not see it. It's that same sort of idea where I can even take a picture of it and try to capture it, but it's no good,
Right.
It's your own little message.
It is. And I would say, too, that is exactly something else that I wanted to kind of touch on, too. And that goes into, Magenta Pixie had a really great video just a little bit ago. And she was talking about how those of us that are in those first and second groups, how though we are, because I, had kind of addressed a little bit ago in a couple of my vids, I had said the words 5D light show. And a lot of people got all bent out of shape and got their panties in a bunch because they're like, it's not 5D because we're still here. Blah, blah. I'm like, okay. So when we break it down, there's states of consciousness that are dimensional states of consciousness. Then we have density states of consciousness. As Magenta Pixie was discussing recently, those of us that are in that first and second group, we are changing the density of the dimensions. We physically are bringing that density difference in, is what she was saying, which I thought was very, very, very interesting, because I started being able to see the crystalline DNA process, for instance, or the clouds, or the interaction, or like I've been working with aerokinesis a lot, and I'm telling you that stuff works. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, like every time I do my work with aerokinesis, which is the ability to move wind or work with wind, It can't be coincidence because it happens every time at this point. So it's really crazy. Not a huge
Okay,
amount.
I have to chime in with that because Eileen and I were talking about this, and we have both been doing it separately with either spreading the clouds to create like where
Yes.
you can see the moon shine through in a spot, and we've been able to do that. I've even had like in the wintertime, my bathroom steams up really bad because of the window in there. So I've been like using my mind to like, because you can see the
Yes.
mist flowing through, and you can like control it. You can make it rotate. You can do all of this stuff, and it's easy to do. I didn't, and it can't be coincidental because I'll
Yeah.
change it up, and it
Right.
changes.
It
So
can't, and don't
it's
tell
working.
yourself this isn't coincidence because I just did it 5 times in a row. Like you
Right,
can't,
right,
and you even fight yourself though, and you're like, no, this can't be true,
right.
right? But I'm so happy you said that because I've been doing the aerokinesis thing working out for a couple years. I want to say I saw Michael Grubb, I think it was originally do it like a couple years ago. I think that's who it was. I think, and then Everyday Masters. I want to say I think I saw him too, maybe. But I was like, that I want to do that. If somebody could do that, because I've always loved the wind, I'm gonna. But it's, and that's what I'm saying though. The
You never
clouds.
know until you try. So
Yeah,
I would
try
recommend
it.
anybody play with it.
Absolutely. Try. The worst that's going to happen is it doesn't work. You know what I mean? And nobody's going to
Right.
see, whatever. They don't know what you're doing, but the clouds, their consciousness, it's ethericness, it's plasma. They will respond to you. They're actual entities. There are so many. I mean, I even have a video, and so many people do at this point. You can go anywhere to find them. Then the clouds look like angels. They look like people holding hands. They like form into shapes. They're colorful. That is not, come on, people. I mean, you could go with a 3D version. Somebody from 3D right away would say that's the government. They're putting up the screen to fool you
Project
and suck
Bluebeam.
you in. Right?
Yeah.
They got you in their grips, apparently. Whatever. But somebody who's of a higher consciousness would understand the connection between your thoughts and what happened with the clouds when you thought it.
That's exactly why I asked during your session because I've been noticing the rainbow iridescence, and I
Yes.
know people are like, "Well, it's the baronium and the strontium and then all this different stuff in
Yeah.
there." And
Exactly.
I asked in the session, it was a mixture of both. They are toying with the stuff, and there is
Right.
some response with the light and what they're spraying up there, but it's not all what they're doing. A lot of it is this consciousness shift
Right.
that we see.
Right. And then I had been told, because one of my biggest concerns when I first woke up was, of course, I did not want to come forward and have this be something terrible and tell people it was something good. And so I had written to everybody right off the bat when I came forward, that any high name that you could think of in the business, I wrote to them. And not just people within our genre. I mean, Morgellons Institutes and scientists and doctors and you name it, because I did not want to bring forward faulty information. So that's why on every single one of my things, you'll hear me say, look, this is just my experience. Take it where you want to take it. That's my perspective. But what I kept asking to my higher self over and over and over again that I needed the answer for was, I at that point was still seeing a lot of chemtrails. So what are they spraying? Is this what's happening? Is, because that's the number one go-to is you're sick from chemtrail fallout and you're going to die, blah, blah, blah. And I kept asking, what is the deal with that? The answer I got back finally, it was really amazing. And it said, originally the agenda was to do that. The original agenda was to stop this higher photonic light from coming in. They knew it was going to happen. They knew it was going to activate our DNA. They knew we were going to be able to bypass their parental controls, so to speak. That's really what it feels like. That was a really good, thank you. That just came down. It feels like they put some parental controls on us, like we have all these higher abilities, but they're like, no, you can't watch the rated R movies yet. You can't do this yet because we're going to keep you down here. So that's what the barrier was for. And it didn't work. It just didn't work. And of course, were they going to try and find something that mimicked this process like transhumanism? Of course, they wanted to go that route because we're unstoppable when we activate all of these additional abilities. Like you said, I mean, if you can work with wind, if you can emit
That's just the beginning.
light in the dark, exactly. It's the tiniest first step. We're using training wheels right now. Just imagine where it could go. And they absolutely would not have wanted that. But I was told that unbeknownst to them, between late 2015, 2016, something happened with what they were spraying, unbeknownst to them, what you could say the white hats behind the scene, that instead it was now going to help us instead of actually kill us. And all I can say is, I don't know any of those details for sure. Nobody has any validation. But what I can say is that the threads that I saw in the Morgellons forums, everything lightened in tone about that time period. People weren't committing suicide as much. They were still having lesions and detox symptoms, but they weren't having the same freaky shit that excuse my language, that they had been. So, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so
Back to the
being
subject.
that this just came up, a mutual nurse friend of ours, I won't say her name, I know most
Oh,
everybody will know who we're talking about, but
we
she
love
was
you.
just telling me, just because of the information, I didn't want to get
No,
her
I
in
love it.
trouble or
Yeah.
anything. But someone came in saying, she works in the psychiatric field. Someone came in saying she heard another nurse dictating it on the entry form that, white, gray, and black balls in her peripheral vision,
Oh my gosh.
and of course medicated them.
Of
So
course.
this came in your session, this whole thing about being careful what you
Right.
go and start spouting off to your doctor about if you're starting to see things, because they might drug you up because it fits into a class that you really shouldn't be put into. You know.
Right. Right. And then I think a lot of people, gosh, it so frustrates me. And that's one of the things that is so important about all of us making sure our voices are heard right now. Because like I had put out just something on my community page, and I'm probably gonna have to do a whole video on it because I was really shocked at the response that I got, because I had gone to the eye doctor and I got diagnosed with auric migraines or ocular migraines, which honestly I really don't fit almost any of the criteria from, because what I was telling him was the symptoms with my eyes that we discussed, that the liquid in the eye has changed in density. It's much thicker than it used to be. It's a more, I don't know if viscous is the word, I don't know where that came from, but it's a thicker, just more gelatinous fluid, and it hardens in my eyes to the point where it feels like glass. Like I wake up every morning with what it looks like pink eye. I have to scrape my eyes open because it crystallizes. All my fluids will crystallize, my blood crystallizes. But I was telling him I was seeing these flashes of color out of the corners of my eyes, and he was like, I've never seen that before. I've heard people say flashes of light. I've never heard somebody say flashes of color. And I'm like, well, I hear that shit all day long. Where in my business,
Right.
but a gal had reached out to me not too long before that and had actually been to an eye doctor, and she had actually got diagnosed with crystallization of the eyes, which they said happens to less than 2% of people. But what I thought was really interesting, however, was she also was diagnosed with ocular migraines or auric migraines, and she'd actually sent me images of her actual eye scans, which I did show to my doctor. And he went out front and asked the other two people he worked with. We had this actual discussion for the whole time out in the front, because we talked the whole time. Because he said in 107 years between all three of us, none of us have ever seen an image that looks like that. And we don't know what it is. And he said in 107 years of experience, they'd never heard anybody had seen flashes of color out of the corners of their eyes, or their tears hardening to, I didn't take it too much further. I sure as heck didn't bring up the filaments that I'm pulling out of my eyes every day, because I knew it would send them over the edge. And I knew very quickly, though, when I went in, one of two things is going to happen when he looks in my eyes. He's either going to say he sees those filaments, because you can't deny that they're there. There are just so many of them, you can't deny it.